The fireworks were still exploding in the sky when the screaming started. At exactly 12:01 a.m., on New Year's Day, the police radio went silent. Every officer in the small town of Mill Creek heard the same thing at the same time, a child's voice crying for help over an open emergency line. The voice was weak, shaking, and scared. "I'm under the house," the child whispered. "Something is breathing with me." Then the line cut off. 2 minutes later, firefighters pulled a small body from beneath a burned-down home on Oak Street. The boy's eyes were open. His mouth was frozen in a scream. And written into the dirt beside him, in deep claw-like marks, were the words, "Happy New Year." No one could explain how it got there. And that was only the first story. Because what happened that night didn't start at midnight. It started weeks before. Earlier that December, Mill Creek was full of lights and noise. It was the kind of town where everyone waved at each other and left doors unlocked. Kids rode bikes until sunset. Neighbors shared food. Nothing bad ever seemed to happen there. Ethan Walker was 10 years old and loved New Year's Eve more than any other day. He loved the loud bangs, the bright colors, and the countdown. His mom, Sarah, always let him stay up late just once a year. His dad, Mark, would lift him onto his shoulders during the fireworks. That year felt special. The Walkers had just moved into an old white house on Oak Street. It was built in the 1950s and smelled like dust and wood. The floors creaked when you walked. There was a narrow crawl space under the house that Ethan wasn't allowed to go into. "Too small," Mark said. "And unsafe." Ethan didn't care much, at first. The first strange thing happened 3 days before New Year's. Ethan woke up at night because he heard tapping. Slow. Soft. Coming from the floor beneath his bed. Tap, tap, tap. He leaned down and pressed his ear to the wooden floor. "Dad?" he whispered. The tapping stopped. The next morning, he told his parents. Mark checked under the house and found nothing. No animals. No broken pipes. "Probably the wood shrinking from the cold," he said. But that night, the tapping came back. This time, it sounded closer. Like fingers moving along the floor. Ethan didn't sleep much after that. On December 30th, Sarah noticed something odd. Muddy footprints appeared near the back of the house. They were small, like a child's feet, but not Ethan's. They were too narrow. And they came from the direction of the crawl space opening. Mark thought it was neighborhood kids playing a prank. Ethan knew better. That evening, while his parents watched TV, Ethan sat alone in his room drawing. His crayon rolled off the desk and onto the floor. When he bent down to grab it, he saw something through the vent in the floor. An eye. It blinked. Ethan screamed and ran from the room. His parents rushed in, but again, nothing was there. No broken vent. No marks. That night, Mark locked the crawl space door from the outside. Or at least, he thought he did. On New Year's Eve, snow fell lightly over Mill Creek. The town gathered in the square for fireworks. The Walkers planned to watch from their backyard. At 11:30 p.m., Ethan said he felt sick. "My stomach hurts," he said. Sarah told him to lie down for a bit. Mark went outside to set up the fireworks. That was when the power went out. The house went dark. The heater stopped. The silence felt heavy. From somewhere beneath the floor, Ethan heard a slow laugh. It sounded like someone trying to copy a human voice, and failing. Ethan ran for the living room, but the floor beneath him shifted. One of the old boards cracked. He fell through, screaming, into the darkness below the house. Sarah heard the scream just as the fireworks began. By the time Mark ran inside, Ethan was gone. The crawl space door was wide open. Police searched for hours. Neighbors joined in. Fireworks exploded overhead while flashlights cut through the snow. At 12:01 a.m., the emergency call came in. And 2 minutes later, they found Ethan. But what truly terrified the town wasn't just how he died. It was what the fire inspector found afterward. Under the house, burned into the dirt, were dozens of old handprints, layered on top of each other, going back years. And every single one was the same size as Ethan's. As firefighters pulled back the remaining boards, one of them shouted. Something had just moved deeper into the crawl space. And it was still alive. The firefighters froze when they heard it move. Something scraped against the dirt under the house. Slow. Careful. Like it knew it was being listened to. Everyone back, the fire chief said. They pulled the boards away and shined stronger lights into the crawl space. The dirt floor looked disturbed, like something had been crawling there for a long time. But whatever had moved was gone. By morning, the house on Oak Street was surrounded by yellow tape. News vans arrived. Neighbors whispered. Parents pulled their kids closer. Sarah Walker sat on the back steps, staring at nothing. She hadn't cried yet. Her eyes were dry and wide, like she was still waiting for Ethan to walk back home. Mark hadn't spoken since midnight. The police said it was an accident. They said the house was old. They said Ethan must have fallen and gotten trapped. But no one could explain the words in the dirt. Or the handprints. Or the sound that several people swore they heard beneath the house after Ethan was found. The next day, the house was scheduled to be demolished. The town didn't want reminders. The Walkers didn't argue. That should have been the end. It wasn't. 3 days later, another child disappeared. Her name was Lily Carter. She lived 2 streets away. Lily was 9 and loved drawing animals. On New Year's morning, she was playing in her living room while her mom cleaned the kitchen. Lily said she dropped her pencil under the couch. She never came back out. When her mother lifted the couch, there was nothing there. No hole. No broken floor. Just a dark, muddy handprint pressed into the carpet. Search teams moved fast this time. They checked storm drains, basements, and crawl spaces. Dogs tracked Lily's scent straight to the old Walker house. Even though it was empty. Even though it was fenced off. That night, a police officer named James Miller stayed to watch the property. He sat in his car with the engine running and the radio low. Snow fell gently. The house looked smaller without lights, like it was shrinking into itself. At 11:58 p.m., James heard something on his radio. Breathing. Not static. Not wind. Breathing. Dispatch? He said. No answer. Then a child's voice whispered through the speaker. Help me. It's almost New Year's again. James jumped out of the car and ran toward the house. The front door was still locked. The boards over the crawl space had been nailed shut. From beneath the house, the breathing grew louder. And then came the tapping. Tap. 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 Like knuckles on wood. James called for backup. As he waited, the ground beneath his feet shook slightly. Dirt puffed out from under the house, followed by a thin, dark hand pushing through the soil. It wasn't a human hand. It had too many joints. James fired his weapon, but the hand disappeared instantly, sliding back under the house like it was never there. Backup arrived minutes later. They searched again. Nothing. The next morning, Lily Carter was found under her own house. Alive. But she wouldn't speak. Doctors said her heart was fine. No broken bones. No signs of a struggle. But Lily refused to sleep unless the lights were on. She screamed if someone closed the door. And when a nurse asked her what happened, Lily only said one thing. It's counting. Over the next week, things got worse. Children across Mill Creek started waking up at night, saying they heard whispering from the floor. Some said they felt hands brushing their feet. Others said something called their names from below. Always below. Always at night. Always closer to midnight. The town council decided to investigate old records. They found something no one wanted to talk about. 27 years earlier, a house on Oak Street burned down on New Year's Eve. A family had lived there with their son, Daniel. The boy was never found after the fire. The official report said he died in the flames. But there was no body. Only handprints burned into the dirt beneath the house. The same size. The same pattern. That night, as the town prepared for an emergency meeting, the power went out again. all across Mill Creek. At the same time, phones buzzed with alerts. People stood in their homes, holding flashlights, listening. Then, from every house with a crawl space, came the sound of tapping. Tap. 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 Children screamed. Parents shouted. And under the empty house on Oak Street, something finally crawled into the open air. It stood up slowly, stretching its long arms, breathing in the cold night. And it smiled as the countdown to midnight began. The thing under the Oak Street house stepped fully into the snow. It was tall but thin, like it had been stretched too far. Its skin was gray and cracked, as if it had lived underground for a very long time. Its arms were too long, hanging past its knees, and its fingers bent in strange directions. When it breathed, its chest did not rise like a normal person's. Instead, its whole body shook. The town clock read 11:54 p.m. 6 minutes to New Year's. Officer James Miller stood frozen, gun shaking in his hands. He wanted to run. His body screamed at him to run. But his feet would not move. The thing lifted its head and looked straight at him. Its face looked almost human. Almost. Its eyes were wide and bright, like a child's. Its mouth curved upward in a slow, careful smile, like it was practicing how to do it. "It's time," it said. Its voice sounded like many voices at once. Some were deep. Some were small. Some sounded like children. James fired. The bullet passed straight through the thing's shoulder. It didn't bleed. It didn't scream. It only tilted its head and watched him with interest. Behind James, houses all over Mill Creek began to shake. From beneath porches, floors, and basements, dark hands pushed up through dirt and wood. Cracks spread across living room floors. Vents bent outward. Parents grabbed their children and ran outside into the freezing night. Some slipped on ice. Some dropped phones. Some fell and didn't get back up right away because the ground beneath them was moving. Inside her home, Lily Carter sat up in bed and began to cry. "It's here," she whispered. "It's done counting." At the hospital, Sarah Walker suddenly gasped and sat straight up in her chair. Her eyes filled with tears for the first time since Ethan died. "Mark," she said. "It's him. I can feel him." Mark looked at her, confused. "Ethan?" She shook her head slowly. "No. Not Ethan. The other one." Back on Oak Street, the thing took a step forward. With every step, the tapping grew louder. Tap. 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 The sound came from everywhere now. Under every house. Under every street. James shouted into his radio, but it only played breathing back at him. The thing raised one long finger and pointed toward the town. "Every New Year," it said calmly, "I get more." James backed away. "What are you?" The thing's smile widened. "I was Daniel," it said. "Once." The name hit James hard. "The fire," he whispered. Daniel nodded. "They didn't hear me. The floor was too thick. The smoke was too loud. I was under the house, counting seconds, waiting for help that never came." The thing's eyes darkened. "So I learned to wait. I learned to count. I learned to crawl." Behind Daniel, the ground split open. More shapes began to rise. Small ones. Child-sized ones. They were not whole. Some had missing arms. Some dragged broken legs. Some were just shadows that moved like smoke. James realized the truth too late. They weren't victims. They were pieces. Daniel lifted both arms toward the sky. The town clock began its final countdown. 10. Daniel turned his head, listening. 9. Houses shook harder. Floors collapsed. Screams filled the air. 8. James ran. He ran toward the Walker house, toward the place where it all started. He didn't know why. Maybe he thought if he could reach the crawl space, he could stop it. Behind him, Daniel laughed. 7. James reached the broken boards and dropped to his knees. The crawl space was open, darker than night itself. Inside, he saw handprints. Fresh ones. 6. A small hand grabbed James's ankle and yanked. He kicked free and crawled backward, heart pounding. 5. Daniel loomed over him now, blocking out the stars. You can't stop time, Daniel said. But you can join it. 4. James raised his gun again, but his hand was grabbed from below. Then another. Then another. Cold fingers wrapped around his arms and legs. 3. James screamed as he was pulled toward the darkness. 2. At the hospital, every light flickered. 1. Midnight. The town clock struck 12. For a moment, everything went silent. Then the screaming stopped. The shaking stopped. The hands vanished. James lay alone in the snow, gasping for breath. The crawl space was empty. Daniel was gone. All over Mill Creek, people slowly stood up. Homes were damaged. Floors cracked. Streets split. But the children were still there. Every missing child was found that night. Alive. Crying. Holding their parents tightly. The news called it a miracle. They said it was mass panic. A gas leak. A power failure. Anything but the truth. The Walker house was torn down the next morning. The dirt was dug up and replaced. New concrete was poured. Life slowly returned to normal. But some things never did. Children in Mill Creek stopped liking New Year's Eve. They refused to sleep when December ended. They listened to the floor. They counted seconds without knowing why. And every year, just before midnight, some of them heard a familiar sound. Tap. 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 Deep beneath the concrete, far below where anyone could reach, Daniel waited. Counting. Smiling. Because next New Year's, he would start again.